Welcome to another episode of Foresight TV. I am today talking to TK King with Accushield with Love Meter. I know I love these every week, so I sort of say, "Oh, I love this guest every week." But this is a really special story about changing the lives of residents. But before we get into what they are doing and what the heck love meters are, first this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Before we get started, I want to say thanks to KARE for sponsoring this episode of Foresight TV. When I talk to solution providers, vendors in the senior living space, one of the things I spend a lot of time talking about and thinking about and asking about is, what's the big problem that you solve? The big problem that KARE solves is not enough staffing. It's a constant conversation that we have in the industry. It's one of the things that we get beat up on in the press. They provide better staff. They are almost like a lifeline to you as an operator who is looking at your residents, their care needs, and saying, I just don't have enough people to fill to make sure I give adequate care. And I don't want to pay too much to go hire agencies. So what KARE does is gives you great team members at a fraction of the cost of using a traditional staffing agency. And so I would even say that, I don't know, they're probably going to hate me saying this, but KARE is your way to keep out of the newspaper. It means that instead of people writing bad things about you not doing KARE, people are going to say wonderful things about how you're transforming the lives of their older loved ones and making their lives better in those last years. So check them out, use them, tell them you heard about us here, and we love what they're doing to make the industry better. TK?
Hello.
Welcome. So this is a really fun, kind of exciting thing to talk about. Let's talk a little bit about who Accushield is and the love meter and what you do, and then we'll get into this big problem that you guys are working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having us. I'm TK King. I'm Accushield's Vice President of Healthcare Strategy. I'm a former operator of 19 years. So, what we're talking about today is really near and dear to my heart. I joined Accushield about 2.5 years ago. And we were founded back in 2013 to help elevate safety and security in the industry by replacing those outdated and risky paper sign-in books. As a result, we collect a lot of data that really streamlines operations, elevates safety, security, infection control, but most importantly helps identify potential risks in behavioral health with residents while streamlining a lot of processes into one program.
And so as you were looking, you get all this data that you collect with people who are coming in. You're looking at visitors and you're looking at other providers that are coming in. And part of what you look at is which residents are being visited, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We call it really a social visit. And our listeners know, there's a lot of people coming and going in communities. We don't count, hospice or third-party care visits because they're really there to provide a service rather than create that social connection. So yeah, when it comes to the love meter, it's all about that social visit tracking.
Okay, and so tell me what you guys discovered as you started looking at the social visits in the communities.
Yeah, it was pretty eye-opening. And I'll admit, as a former operator, I never really used my paper sign-in books to track social visits. I always looked at activity engagement and clinical components. And so with that idea in mind, leveraging social visit data, There's a bunch of studies out there that support this as well. Even the US Surgeon General released something last year. About 50% of residents in the long-term post-acute industry get 0 visits. And it was eye-opening. It's all the one thing I'll say to that is it's all about good data. So as long as the folks are using the system the way it's designed. But yeah, about 50%.
That's really shocking. So there was an article, I don't know whether you saw it in just the last couple of days in the Wall Street Journal that talks about friendship snacks. I'm not sure I got the title quite right, but what it said is there's some research that's been done that if it's always better to have face-to-face visits, right? But even if you can even do like a Zoom call for 5 minutes or an in-person visit for 5 minutes with somebody who you already have a relationship with, that it can go a long way to solve loneliness. So I know that's not exactly what you're talking about, but you guys kind of came up with a plan to make the lives of these people who are not getting any visitors or just a few visitors a year better, right? Can you talk about this is Project Love Meter, right? Do I have that right?
You do, yes. And the joke is it's not a dating website for seniors. But no, all joking aside, so our customers today are taking what we call the Love Meter report. And that report helps track and trend all the social visits for each resident over a period of time. And you know very well, Steve, our listeners do too, that there's other components that go into loneliness and isolation risks, like mobility status, recent loss of vision or hearing, their participation in activities. So there's other things that our customers are taking into account to determine, are they really at risk? We're just adding to that. We told ourselves though, or we asked ourselves rather, identifying the problem's not enough. We need to help solve it. And so we looked at the rest of the data we had and realized we've got access to about 1.6 million volunteers across the country. So we are not only taking advantage of the pool we've already got, we're also recruiting volunteers from churches, universities. We're on the AARP website. And we are really facilitating what I like to call a matching process. So we take hobby and interests, availability, and pair volunteers with lonely residents to go right back to what you said, help facilitate that social connection.
So what percentage of there's so many questions I want to ask. So I got a couple questions. This is where I want to start. So I teach a bunch of kids at my church every weekend, and I'm thinking maybe I could get them to plug into this. How would volunteers get started?
Yeah, great question. And we love the intergenerational volunteer capability as well. So high school students, any kind of student is wonderful. But so to get involved as a volunteer, they'll want to visit projectlovemeter.com/volunteer. There's an application process. And I say that because we want to make sure we're sending folks that are appropriate to visit with seniors, as well as seniors that may be experiencing memory issues. There's a vetting process. And so they apply, they're letting us know who they are, what their background is and their interests and hobbies. And then we partner them with the facility. The facility will still go through their normal onboarding process, just like they normally would with volunteers. And then once that's done, we have a solution that helps schedule the volunteers, just like a staffing solution would.
Okay, so if I wanted to take a group of kids, I'd go in and maybe I just register for me and put in what I'd like to do, and then I'd have to do whatever I have to do, and then you'd connect me with a community that would like to have visits, and I'd work with them to do whatever they needed me to do and go visit.
Absolutely. Yep.
So it sounds sort of complicated as I say that, but I don't think it's really that complicated, is it?
It's truly not. You simply fill out an application. And the best part is if you're not comfortable visiting with residents one-on-one, there's other things you can do as a volunteer. We also help facilitate those tasks as well. But it's as simple as filling out an application and then getting matched with the facility.
And how long does the process usually take?
From start to finish, it's really dependent on the volunteer getting involved in the onboarding process with the building, but it could take about a week.
Okay. And then let's talk about it a little bit. Since most of our audience are operators, first off, this only works, I assume, if I'm an Accushield customer.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And so and there are a lot of those, so it's not like that's a tiny number. And if you're looking at this and you're not an I'll do a little commercial for you here too, right? That if you're not an Accushield customer, you ought to be, because this is just one more add-on benefit that can really make a difference in the lives of your residents. So I'm an operator. First off, I assume I have to opt in on this.
Yep, you do. It's so aside from just having the benefit of Accushield as a safety and security, component to your facility, the love meter and the scheduling piece is something you have to opt into.
Cool. And so I sign up for this, and then at some point in time, I start getting messages from TK or from your team saying, "Hey, I've got somebody who wants to come visit." Or do you start by, and how do you prep the residents for this?
Great question. So it really starts at during clinical meetings where we're evaluating resident needs, and with value-based care, creeping in on us. That's really, really important with the isolation piece. But it starts really in the clinical meeting, identifying the appropriate residents, their actual risk. And I say appropriate because not every resident is going to benefit from social visits. They may benefit from other interventions. So that's step one. Step two is letting Accushield know how many volunteers you need. We provide the volunteers, and then you guys can schedule them just like you normally would with staff. You fill in basically the shifts.
So, because I'm thinking that at least in some cases there are going to be residents who maybe don't have outside visitors, but have created a good social network inside, and maybe don't need it or want it, right?
Right.
So, and then typically, how often do they go visit, or how often do they get visits? Once a week, once a month, once a year?
It's hopefully not once a year, but it really is based off what the resident needs. If they say, I want to start with 2 visits a week or every other week, we accommodate that just based off of their preferences. The best part is that it's all flexible. So we can increase, we can decrease. It's truly about what they need. The one exception I'll say to that is that we always strive for at least 30-minute sessions, nothing less.
Okay.
Because we really think anything less than that's just not enough.
So I guess one of the things that whether I was an operator or a visitor, I'd worry about is, like, I'm glad to go do this, but I don't know what to talk about.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you help with that?
We do, yeah. So again, the only way we can help reduce isolation and loneliness risk is truly by facilitating that social connection. If you don't know how to go into a resident's apartment or space and have a conversation with them, we're not solving anything. So we coach volunteers to have the appropriate resources so that when you walk into a room and Mrs. Smith just isn't engaging with you, here's some tools to be able to spark a conversation. The other thing I'll say to that is, because we're matching the volunteers based off hobbies and interests, we're giving them something to talk about based off both individuals' backgrounds.
Got you. I would think that just even something as simple as giving a list of questions to ask the resident would be really good. I know that, I've got my almost 91-year-old stepfather living with us, and sometimes we struggle with that. But I know that if I start asking him about what it was like he was a Stanford football. What am I trying to say? Quarterback. And, I get him telling stories about that, or his time when he was in the Army, and he can just talk for hours, and they're wonderful, wonderful stories. So, and at this point in time, are you having more trouble finding communities or volunteers?
Finding volunteers is always a problem. I did a study with current customers to find out how much time do we normally spend recruiting a volunteer. It's about 31 hours for one. And
Wow.
yes. And the
Yeah.
second question to that was, how often does that volunteer actually show up for onboarding? That was 29%. So the amount of effort our industry puts into finding volunteers is just crazy.
Is really huge. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you, COVID-19, because that made it even harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is really why we want to be part of that solution, and we're constantly recruiting. So good
Well, I
stuff.
would think that you could, but I mean, one of the things I'm wondering is, can you find family members who are already visiting a loved one who could also take on one other person? I don't know
Yeah,
whether that works or not.
absolutely. And what we really find we're seeing a lot of success in is CCRCs. If you have an independent section in your campus, can you leverage those folks to also meet with the other levels of care? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of options, and we're helping uncover all of them as much as we can.
So, do you have any stories for me that you can just tell me about these connections and what's happened?
Yeah. Recently I was at a community in Virginia, and I had the pleasure of meeting with a volunteer who was there to see a couple different residents. And when she learned about what we're doing with Project Love Meter, I think we had about an hour conversation about how important it is to make sure not just that we're finding volunteers, but we're helping communities identify those residents that are at risk. She shared a lot of information about the effort she puts into finding residents that need love, and it was a unique conversation because I think for me it told me that we're on the right path, to really make a difference. Yes, in the lives of residents, yes, in the lives of the community staff, but also volunteers. They may also be experiencing loneliness in their community. And so the idea of being able to facilitate these meaningful connections is pretty powerful. And it really, was great to hear that from her.
So I really like that a lot. You're probably familiar with the sort of the social media, and I think there's actually a website of is it Humans of New York. I'm looking at Jada behind the scenes because I know this is one of these things. So there's a website called Humans of New York, and this guy goes out and he takes pictures of people on the streets, and then writes up little really powerful stories about them.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that we miss, and I feel like I'm sort of beating the same drum over and over again, is I don't think that we spend enough time telling the stories of our residents and talking about how we're changing their lives and listening to them. And so this could be, I would love to start seeing you guys collecting stories from volunteers actually
Yeah.
about their experiences and what it means to them. So
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, because we had an internal meeting this morning talking about something very similar. It's the feedback from residents is extremely important, and we're going to help facilitate that, but also getting it from the volunteer as well. And then imagine having that story shared with loved ones. They can't come visit. There's a lot of value in getting it from volunteers as well. So definitely agree with you.
yeah, well, and I think what I find very exciting about all of this is like, sometimes you look at initiatives and you say, okay, I've got this great initiative, I'm going to do this thing. Now what are the downsides, right? Who's it going to impact negatively? And this is such a great story because I don't know that I guess maybe the one downside would be that it would take a little bit of staff attention, but really ultimately it should actually make their lives easier, right?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, the what I love, we're talking about love meter, social isolation, volunteers, but what our customers get with that solution is visitor management, safety and security, alerts so you know who's in your building and who's not supposed to be there. So there might be some upfront work just to get this integrated into processes, but within a few weeks, if not days, the automation we're creating for operators and clinicians saves more time than most applications do. And I'm a former operator, so I get to say that and actually mean it.
Well, and I'm looking at this. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, let's say you have 10 volunteers who are coming into a community once a month.
Yeah.
Those people assume, assume that they're going to have a good experience doing that. And it's like having 10 marketing ambassadors out there in the marketplace saying, man, I went there and this was an amazing experience. And, it's like it to me, the marketing benefits for occupancy is just huge.
Absolutely. And, in our system, when a volunteer leaves, we're asking them, how was the visit? They can rate the facility, provide feedback, just like any other visitor type could when they're signing out. And some of our customers go even a step further. And after they realize they're getting good feedback on a consistent basis, they're sending through the system automatically a link to go post a review online. So it's truly a really good engine, to your point, of increasing online social media presence. And to that point, a lot of the customers that are using Project Love Meter today, they're really highlighting during their tour process, during the move-in process. Here's what we're doing for your loved one, aside from just the safety and security component, which, by the way, is huge. We're also using the data we collect to help your loved one, make sure we know how their mental status is going. So it's a big sales differentiator as well.
Yeah, I really, really like that. So are you finding these are I find myself asking questions. I'm thinking, well, I probably should have asked this before I got on the air, but here we are. So are you finding that the communities are embracing it? Are you having trouble getting communities to do it?
No, and truthfully, a lot of the industry looks at Accushield as a health screening solution. I used Accushield during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so there is a little bit of what I like to call stigma attached to it.
Yep.
No one wants to health screen. I get it. We still have that functionality for folks that want to use it. But when people realize the value of knowing who's in your building, getting real-time alerts, having the ability to a report that tells you who's in there when there's an emergency, and then you add on this layer of resident well-being and mental health and all these volunteer resources, as soon as everyone understands that, there is so much buy-in that you almost can't get it implemented fast enough.
Yeah, and the other thing I keep thinking, and I wouldn't really talk to you guys about this very much, but it would be really fun to spend some time. I know I'm sure you guys have already done this, really digging sort of deep into your data to see what, because I'm sure there are lots of other insights about sales and marketing and programming and how long people are in, and I just that data is just so important. So. So I think ultimately actually, let me do that. Any other stories about maybe specific interactions that volunteers and residents have had?
The one that always sticks out is the one I kind of went through. I think at the end of the day, what matters most is just that the connection that we're making between the two. We're going to be focusing a lot over the next couple of weeks on analyzing the data specifically from a point of view of how much are we helping reduce isolation, depression, all of
Yeah.
that. We're going to be releasing some case studies that are pretty powerful as well, and hopefully some more volunteer feedback for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think that the ability to really, it's one of those rare cases where you can demonstrate. I think you actually end up reducing the workload on your team members, right? You've got this interaction that takes place. So often I worry as I talk to technology solution providers, is that no matter how good the solution is, no matter how good the technology is, it takes more staff time and energy and champions to do. And while there's some of that with what you're doing, ultimately what it does is it actually lifts the burdens. And so you create a better life for residents, which is terrific.
Yeah, absolutely. So, anything we can do to take, we like to say at the office here, take stuff out of the backpack of workers. That's our mission. So I do think we're accomplishing that with this.
Cool. What else should I be asking you that I haven't?
I think some of the other things that are really important, we're talking about social visit data, but one of the other things I find extremely important is knowing the third-party care visits that are happening. Since everyone is signing in and signing out at the kiosk, say, for example, that the daughter of Mrs. Jones says, I really want to know who's coming to see mom. You've got the ability to capture that from both a social perspective plus that third-party care perspective, which really goes a long way, and that transparency with loved ones.
Yeah, I think that data is just really huge. And then you've got something that you can also report back to family members on, right? Because I think that one of the things I hear from operators very frequently is, family members will say things like, "Hey, you didn't," or "What about?" And you go, "Well, actually we did." And so it becomes just a way to really better serve, really to protect the community and serve everybody. I want to make mention that we've got coming up on the 17th of April, Workforce Wednesday. We know that workforce is, and really workforce is a big part of what you guys do at Accushield is helping to make sure that all gets done right and safely. But on Workforce Wednesday, I'll be with Brett Landrum at ProCare HR, and we are going to be talking about how you create great cultures where people love coming to work today, every single day. And so you don't want to miss that. TK, this has been really, really good. I appreciate, mostly what I appreciate is your guys' passion to not just sell stuff to the industry, right? You guys are like, you were an operator, Charles was an operator, and you love the industry, you love the people in the industry. And so this has been really, really fantastic. And I look forward to hearing more stories about changed lives. So,
absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. We love talking with you and the audience, and excited, to see how things keep going for us.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. And so I wish you all a great weekend, and I will see you next week.